sure. Really sweet. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, understood, understood. Mhm. No, 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 no. Jordan, do you have anything to say to that? No, he just is. He's just so funny. I did too. He's just so funny.
Clearly, Tyler does not.
Dead
You
cat.
don't.
Well, no, the industry is dead cat, but you know, some of our personalities, so.
I love this picture. Oh, true. It's impressive, actually.
All right, good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Pioneer Valley Regional School Committee. This is the public hearing for our fiscal year 2025 budget. I'd like to open the meeting at 6:13. And we have a couple of members remote, so why don't we do a roll call for members who are present?
Karen O'Neill, Leiden, here.
Thank you.
Gretchen Calton, Bernardston, here.
Sylvia Cummings, Northfield here.
Melissa Gary, Bernardston here.
And online we have Michelle Girusso and Stephen Martin and Raina Dastu here. Great. The way things will go tonight, we're going to have our Director of Finance, Jordan Burns, give us a presentation. We're going to hear the presentation first, and then please hold your questions for after. For those of you in the room, please come to the mic to be recognized to ask your question or make your comment. For those online, please put your question in the chat. And if you, any of you have specific questions about a particular slide, please make note of which slide so we can refer back to that slide and pull it up when we're answering your question. And also when you ask your question or give your comment, please identify your name and your connection to the district. Let's see what else. To assure that everyone who gets a chance to speak, we'll try to recognize people who have not commented previously during the hearing before recognizing people who wish to have additional remarks. And with...
Hold on one second.
Yes.
Steve can't hear us. He can hear Michelle when he...
Steve, can you hear me now?
No, little...
Patricia, I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
I couldn't hear you before. Thanks.
Okay, and Steve got off. No, he's back.
I can hear you now, Michelle. Thank you. I can hear you now, Patricia. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Mute the speakers on the other laptops so that it
Yeah,
doesn't
those
create
are-
a cycle
yeah.
of the speaker going back into the microphones.
Okay.
Oh, I'm not
Yeah,
in the meeting.
so they're
You're not in the
muted.
meeting.
and
You're
he's not
muted?
in-
I'm muted.
But I'm keeping mine on.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. All right, so without further ado, take it away, Jordan.
All right, good. Yeah, thank you everybody for being here. Appreciate the audience, and I'm sure there'll be lots of good questions to come. I'll try to move through the PowerPoint pretty quickly, hopefully maybe 30 to 45 minutes, and then as Raina mentioned, we definitely welcome all questions and discussion of what's been presented, and obviously people have budgets as well, so there may be specific questions regarding the budget itself rather than the PowerPoint. But as Raina said in French, without further ado, let's start. Commence. All right. So we wanted to put this slide up front because from the beginning of the budget process, we talked about aiming for 3% increase for the total operating assessments to the towns, and that's where we have landed at. So we're happy that we can be where we thought we'd be at the beginning of the budget cycle, not have to have higher assessments than we had initially budgeted for. So everything came in where we had anticipated in terms of state revenues, so we're able to be where we wanted to be on assessments. So.
Are you able to share in the Google Meet? They can't see the slides.
Go ahead. We're going to the next one.
Yeah, sure. And then move on to the budget development timeline. So we just wanted to give a brief overview of the process that's taken place to develop the budget. So the red, let's see if I can get my color coding correct because there isn't a key, so a lot of pressure. But the red were the actual subcommittee meetings. We had 10 or 11 subcommittee meetings. We've had, we had 2 preliminary hearings and now the big public hearing. 14 meetings. There's school committee meetings on there as well. And obviously next week we'll have the school committee meeting to vote on the budget. But, as we discussed last year, it's a several-month process, and really a lot of what ultimately made it into the budget we are talking about in August and September, as well as we planned for that October 26th meeting where we updated the assessments for this year. Going into that, we had to look at multi-year planning. So really, the budget and the budget process started in the summer, really, and now we're it feels really quick, but now we're at the end of the process with only one more week to go. So I think it's been a good process, and we've had, in addition to the subcommittee meetings, been to both elementary buildings. We're going to be speaking with staff here tomorrow at PVRS. So we've tried to have as many meetings with all the stakeholders as possible. So one more week to go. So moving on to student enrollment in the elementary. And these are, I should say, I love all these pictures that Patricia curates. She does a great job with always focusing on our lovely students. I think that the presentation would be less interesting if there were like action shots of me. So I'm glad that we focused on students. So these are great. I really sincerely believe that. So student enrollment, what we want to go through is looking at class sizes, the progression from FY23 to this year, FY24, and then looking at where we're projected. And these slides have had an update. Thank you to my good friend and colleague Renee Kier for pointing out at the VES presentation that we had pre-K and K for the past years and current year, because we know those, but then it kind of looked like a bunch of sections were leaving. So we've updated the images, the graphs, to show just grade 1 through 6, and the reason for that is that's where you have certainty, right? You know how many sections you have, and you know how many students you have moving up. So that's what we're focusing on in terms of being able to compare like to like. So in terms of grade 1 through 6 in FY23, as of October 27th, 2022, the average class size at BES was 17.6 students. And then in this current year, grades 1 through 6 have average class size of 16.6 students. So classes are getting smaller. And then projected going forward, this large grade 5 class is going to be projected to be split into 2 sections. So, and the projection for FY25, because of that, is for class sizes to actually go down a little bit further to 14.8 students per class side per class. And those are, pretty, I think for some districts, enviable class sizes. Obviously, we've heard from faculty about increased need, and so it's good that we can have these smaller class sizes and attend to all the needs of all of our students. So 14.8 students is what we're projecting for next year at BES. Moving on to NES. So same thing, focusing on grades 1 through 6, because that's what we know for certain. The kindergarten students, we have a really good, clear picture of how many kindergarten students we have currently, so we know what's moving up through those years from kindergarten to grade 1 and so forth all the way to grade 6. So in FY23, as of October 27, 2022, importantly, right, this was when the students from Warwick, Warwick was still a member of the district, so the Warwick students were still attending Northfield Elementary School. So the average number of students was 15.8 per class. And then this year, in FY24, as of September 21st, 2023, class size is now 15.3 students. So a little bit smaller than BES currently, but as the grade 6 graduates up to the middle high school, PVRS, there's going to be more single section classes at NES, which will actually increase average class size a little bit going into FY25. So in FY25, average class size of 16 students in grades 1 through 6. So still pretty enviable class sizes, right? 14.8 at BES, 16 at NES, and again, obviously everyone realizes that there's different levels of need, so it's good to be able to have some of these smaller class sizes. Good. And then just looking at classrooms, this year at BES and NES in grades 1 through 6, there's 10 classrooms at BES and 8 at NES. Next year, there will be 10 again at BES and down to 7 at NES as the 2 sections. 6th grade moves up and the 5th grade moves into 6th, but the 4th grade moving up to 5th only has 1 section, so they lose a section there at NES. So just looking at class sizes between the 2 schools this year and then what we project for next year, overall pretty similar, right? Moderately sized class sizes at the 2 buildings and in FY24 and then in FY25, BES class sizes are going down quite a bit from 16.6 to 14.8, so almost 2 students less per class at NES and BES and then NES increasing from 15.3 to 16, so only a 0.7 difference, so pretty small difference there, but overall reasonably sized classes. And so the implications, right, I mean, having 1 less class size, there might be a concern that, well, what would that mean for, overall employment of teachers, but ultimately, we intend on having 2 new math interventionist roles that are for certified teachers, so there's opportunity there. Even though there's 1 less class, there's actually an additional overall opportunity in the elementary for certified teachers. So that's really the implication is overall class sizes continue to be reasonable, and it seems that there will be opportunities for everyone who's currently employed to have a role if they're interested, if some people who among the classroom teachers are interested in these interventionist roles. And then moving on, district-wide at the October 26th school committee meeting, we had talked about the investments we want to make over time of $615,000. And now I want to provide a little bit more detail of what we'll actually be doing in the FY25 budget related to those investments. So in FY25, we're going to, as we discussed in October, be investing in a lot of the foundational areas, right, of a school, teaching and learning, right? So $137,000 in textbooks across the 3 buildings and $30,000 in professional development to support, the curriculum renewal initiatives. I know that there's going to be a close look at math across the district, and not only, textbooks, but the professional development to support that. So now that we have a full-time director of teaching and learning, we can start to make these big investments in curriculum. The other area, not just as a result of the facilities master plan, but another foundational area of the schools, right, is maintaining our facilities at the middle high school. That's the responsibility of the regional school. And what we've decided to do for the FY25 budget is, rather than assessing for a capital assessment at the middle high school, we're going to use our reserves to pay for those expenses. So some of those things that we want to do are some interior doors that are either damaged or need replacement, new freezer for food service, our normal carpet replacement, the rotation we have to ensure that the carpet is replaced on a regular basis, and additional safety enhancements. So as we continue to go through the Safer Schools grant and make investments in safety and partner with local law enforcement and first responders to discuss safety enhancements, we want to continue to be responsive to that and continue to invest in those areas. I know long-term, bigger facility investments, we're still looking at the facility master plan recommendations, and that'll be a longer process. But in some of the short term, we want to focus on capital investments that are related to safety. Because obviously in the interim, if and when we decide to do any larger building project, in the interim we still need to ensure that the current schools are safe and operating. So I think that those are all reasonable investments and good ways to, because a lot of these investments are coming from reserves, good way to help keep assessments reasonable while also making these important investments. So those are some of the investments that we talked about in October that are now in this current budget for FY25. And then getting into the overall expenditure budget, so moving from version 5 to version 6, overall local spending and overall all fund spending are both down by about $24,000 from the version 5.0 to version 6.0. The overall difference in the local spending between the FY24 to the FY25 budget is $95,294 or 0.64%. So significantly less than 1% increase in local spending. So again, our focus is making key investments, having really enviable class sizes at the elementary, continuing the investments that we started in FY24, like the wood shop, environmental educator, making all those investments, but at the same time ensuring that the growth of spending is reasonable so that we don't need large assessment increases to support all those investments. So I'm really happy that we were able to kind of do all of those things in a single budget, continue to make the investments that we committed to, and also remain committed to the 3% overall assessment increase target that we had discussed at the beginning of the budget cycle. So that's the expenditure side of things. And revenues. So this gets even more into what I know some people have been anxiously awaiting throughout this budget cycle. Assessments, right? A very important piece of how the district is funded. So town assessments, obviously, from FY23 to 24 to 25, it looks like a big decrease in overall assessments, right? From FY23, obviously, we need to control for the fact that the FY23 assessments were based on a 4-town district, and FY24 and 25 are based on a 3-town district. So, but so that's one important thing to keep in mind. But as you can see, FY24 town assessments going from $8,558,898 up to $8,815,665, which is a 3% assessment increase. Importantly, that FY24 number is the reduced town assessment amount from October 26. So that's a 3% increase on the reduced amount. So obviously one area that is growing a lot is tuition revenue. Obviously some of that has to do with Warwick now being tuition students at the middle high school, but it also has to do with large growth in enrollment from Vernon students. We're not budgeting for large growth, obviously, year over year in tuition, but we are expecting essentially fairly steady, maybe one more student between FY24 and FY25. So we feel that's a conservative estimate. But overall, the revenue picture supports the expenditure budget, both at $14,816,232. So these are the town assessments, the operating assessment. The moving from left to right, the first number, $8,774,112, was the total amount of operating assessments that was approved on March 15th. As I'm sure everyone recalls fondly, the governor's budget was much later last year than it was this year, so we didn't have finalized numbers from the state until after February. So that first budget was approved on March 15, 2023. Over the summer, as the revenue picture brightened considerably, we looked at that and felt it was appropriate to reduce assessments for our member towns. So moving from $8,774,112 down to $8,558,898 $898. So that's where the assessments ultimately ended up at, a pretty significant decrease there. And then the 3% increase, as you can see, moves us back up to $8,815,665 for FY25. So 3% from the lower amount, but I think this graph illustrates nicely, pretty close to almost level with where we were in March. So, I think we're pretty proud of that in the sense that we hope to be good partners with the towns and ensure that we can help control growth of assessments as much as possible while also making key investments in the district. Another illustration that I think helps to think about assessments year over year. So when we talk about capital and operating together, on March 15th, 2023, the school committee approved total capital and operating assessments of $8,829,112, which then in October was amended to be reduced down to $8,588,898. And FY25, the proposed budget doesn't have any capital at the middle high school. So when taking capital and operating together, the total proposed assessments are actually less than what was approved originally on March 15th. So going from $8,829,112 in March down, in February now to $8,815,665. So again, just trying to show a graphic that shows the relatively modest growth of assessments, I think would be one way to describe that, and a decrease in real dollar terms. And this graph just shows assessment growth from 23, 24 to 25. So with FY23, obviously we control for the fact that Warwick, we take Warwick out of the equation, and we're looking at really town assessment, operating assessments for just the 3 towns. So for FY23, FY24 to FY25. And so, as you can see, Bernardston, average annual assessment growth of 2.14%, Leiden, 2.96%, Northfield, an average decrease of 0.55%, and overall district-wide among the 3 towns, the average annual assessment growth is 0.75%. So, again, we want to continue to make important investments, but we want to also budget in such a way that assessment growth is reasonable. So thus far we've been able to do that, and we're very happy that to be able to present this budget that has modest assessment growth. So as the next slide, we're going to look at all the intricacies of the operating assessment and total assessment. So we just wanted to provide a quick primer on how that's all broken down. So for the town assessments, the minimum local contribution plus the above minimum local contribution is the operating assessment, and for the total assessments, it's a combination of operating, transportation, and capital. Gets you to your total assessments for each of the respective towns. Right, so total money, Bernardston moves from $3,099,273, which represented a 0.65% increase in FY24. And the proposed assessment for FY25 is $212,147, which is a year-over-year increase of 3.64%. Leiden, the actual assessment in FY24 was $858,291, an increase of 2.2%, moving to the proposed assessment of $890,361 in FY25, which is an increase of 3.74%. And Northfield, FY24 actual assessments of $4,601,334, which is a decrease of 3.45%, proposed to move to $4,713,157 in FY25, which is an increase of 2.43%. And this is just additional breakdown of how the assessments are actually calculated, but the total assessment numbers don't change. This just provides additional background to how the assessments are calculated, providing the assessment percentage, minimum local contribution, above minimum operating and transportation for the total assessment. And there's no capital in this graphic because there is no capital assessment for this year. All right, so we're getting close to the question and answer portion. But overall, with the slides, what we were just trying to show is the picture of, and I think we talked about this at length at the October 26th meeting, the hard work at a school, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a support staff, whether you're an administrator, the hard work's never going to be done. You know, we're never going to get to a spot as a district where we say, we're done, we're good, let's just stay right here, right? Education and schools in general are always measuring themselves based on improvement, right? That's how we measure students, I think, right? It's not, you know, good, bad, smart, whatever. It's you know, improvement and development. And I think that what we can say as a district, you know, in terms of our financial picture, I think we made great improvement, right? We discussed in October paying off the state loan, the reserves, providing refunds of both excess and deficiency and lower assessments to towns, but also now this budget is another step in that direction where we discussed in October a target of a 3% assessment increase. That's where we ended up. But in addition, we're maintaining reasonable class sizes at the elementary. We're making key foundational investments in extremely important areas of a school, both teaching and learning, facilities, safety, and we're continuing to expand our offerings actually at the middle high school, and doing all of that while maintaining modest assessment growth. So I think the picture of the budget we want to present is really those things. Continued progressive improvement. We're never going to be done, no matter how good things get, but we do feel that this budget continues on that positive trajectory. But it won't actually be the budget until first we get approval from school committee, hopefully on February 15th, 2024. And most importantly, all of our towns need to also approve this budget, and those town meetings are happening in May and June.
Maybe a shout out to Heather Batinsky for being the kids.
Oh, yes.
She's in the back there.
Of course, right. Shout out to Heather Batinsky in attendance for emphasizing what wonderful students we have, getting them out, taking these really cute pictures that we have
Used
a ton and appropriated them, you know, to positive feelings for us. But really, the biggest thank goes to the person who organized and got students out there. So thank you so much,
Thank you, Heather Batinsky.
So right now, if people are interested, you can please questions and conversation, and I would probably just shut my computer and go for that. And yes, I guess I should maybe a reminder of what Raina had mentioned. People are interested in speaking can come down to the microphone and state their name and affiliation to the school. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And yeah, but I guess we're back to the boss. Now Raina's the boss again, so good.
Yeah, come on down.
Brian Keir, Bernardston Select Board. My favorite subject, administration.
Sure.
I noticed you had the reduction of 1.5 FTEs at the last meeting. That was awesome. I do understand the nurse leader one, I believe, but we did mention that over the last 20 years, the SPED secretary, I believe, if I'm saying the title correctly, the population has dropped over 50% over 20 years, so we reduced that position because of that. I'm just curious if and why, if we didn't, why we didn't look at the rest of the administration, given the total school population has dropped a significant number. I'm not going to quote a number. I think it's somewhere in that 40 to 50% over the last 10 to 15 years, why we don't see proportional cut to the rest of the administration line item.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, reasonable question. So I think we're always looking at every position, and there are certain positions where number of students and proportional number of students correlate pretty closely probably to workload. And then there are other positions where how many students you have isn't a great correlation to workload. You know, I'll use my position as an example just to keep the focus on me. You know, even a school there's schools in upstate New York, beautiful part of the country, might add, that have enrollment of 40 students, and they have a full-time business manager. They might be compensated. They likely are compensated a little less than a school that has 2,000 students, but you still have to have somebody, and you have to have somebody full-time because the reporting requirements are the same, right? Everything you have to do, you still have to do one of, you know, no matter how many students you have. So, so on those type of roles, I think that it's hard to do that. But I think every year we will continue to take a close look at it. I can't say every year there will be 1.5 less administrators, but what I can say is if there isn't a need for a position, no matter how much we like the person, I don't think the position will exist. I think we're committed to being reasonable with, it's not our money, right? It's the public's money, a huge portion of it. I mean, some of it local, but state. So we need to be cognizant of that every year and take a look at it. So I think that you're correct. This isn't the end, as I was saying about improvement. This isn't the end of looking at the number of anything that we have, right? It's going to be based on need. So if it becomes apparent that any position isn't needed, I think that we would move decisively to reduce the position or eliminate the position depending on need. So that's, I think, going to be our basis every year, is this needed? And without revealing too much, when Patricia and I and school committee have candid conversations, pretty much everything's on the table, and we have discussions about, is this position still needed? Is it needed at that FTE level? So, you know, it's certainly on our radar as well. What you're saying is reasonable, and we'll continue to look at it, for sure.
Again, the administration line item, my favorite. Sure. BES, NES school principal lines. They only went up $40. Yeah. So was there fudge factor built into those contracts from the last couple of years, or?
No, that's a reasonable question as well. So what happened is the budget for last year was $105,000. But the actual salaries, because what happens, you know, this stuff happens in February and then actual negotiations happen. Ultimately, when we negotiated the contracts, the number we came in at was $101,000. So although we had $105,000 budgeted, ultimately we negotiated contracts for less. And then this year, although we still have to negotiate, our anticipation is it'll be somewhere in that $105,000 range this year. So that's why it looks like we're only paying our principals $40 more, which is, I would say, inhumane year over year. That probably wouldn't be very nice, but it would be more like $4,040 more. So on a percentage basis, basically 4%. And again, what we're trying to do is just create enough money in the budget line for the negotiation. That doesn't necessarily mean that's exactly what someone will be paid. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. I know people generally prefer if it's less, but sometimes because of market conditions and the competitiveness of that position, we sometimes do have to go over.
So hey there, Renee Keir, teacher at Bernardston Elementary, Bernardston resident, on and on it goes. Yeah, so I just wanted to I have the same question that I had at the elementary, so,
I
yeah.
thought I solved it.
I know.
Tell me
I
the slide, Renee, and I'll put it up.
I don't, yeah, oh, sorry, 12, is that the number at the bottom there?
Yeah.
So again, I guess my concern in just being transparent about, I understand from grade 1 to 6 is what we know because we don't have enrollments yet because we haven't done K and pre-K.
Yep.
But in terms of how many classrooms, like we do know, for example, in slide 12, that there were 12 classrooms this year. So again, in comparing at Bernardston, and there were 11 at Northfield. So like there are things that we do know about this year that
Sorry, there are 10 at Northfield. 10, right? At
so it
Northfield.
says 10, the green one is Bernardston, right?
Yeah.
The first one. So that
Right,
that
11 and 10.
reflects what currently is in play, which is 12 classrooms. Because pre-K and K are at the building. So I guess is what I'm saying.
Oh,
I
right,
just
yeah.
want to be assured that because we don't see X number of teachers times this amount of salary because it's such a complicated formula that, and in years past, under other administrations, teachers have been left out of the formula and then it created a backslide and we needed to find money from others. So I just wanted the school committee to be assured, and the public, that
Sure.
all teachers have been accounted for, understanding that there could be flux of one class or two depending on
Yep.
enrollment, mostly in preschool, I would imagine. I mean, we know at least going in with one kindergarten because
Yep.
that's not optional.
Yep.
Anyway, so that
Yep.
throughout, I guess it's always confused me why we start at first grade. And
Yep.
so again,
Yep.
that wasn't adjusted. And I just wanted assurances that all teachers are reflected in the budget, so you don't have to do any backpedaling or whatever we would say later. Like,
No backpedaling necessary, I can assure you.
that may not be the.
I struggle front pedaling, so backpedaling would be disastrous. So no, but to answer your question, I know the essence of your question is, despite only being sure of grades 1 through 6, that we actually budgeted for the other classrooms, and we did in fact do that. So it's good for a point of clarity, but yes, of course, we budgeted.
And Renee, I appreciate that point. I think it was during my first year here when we faced the embarrassment and challenge of, I don't remember if it was one person, 1.5, 2 people.
Yeah.
They hadn't been put in them somehow. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Kathy Hawkins Harrison, Northfield resident. I guess this is a little bit of a follow-up to Brian's question regarding the district administrative salaries. And my question is, when you're standing on the steps of MIMS, or not Marshall's anymore, the Country Corner, and someone says, how come, whatever, the technology coordinator got a $1,000 raise, the finance person got a many $1,000s raise, superintendent, et cetera. These are big raises that are not commensurate with what your teachers got in their contract negotiations. So what is the layman's answer to the normal person in those 2 towns or 3 towns?
Sure, thank you. So I think the answer often comes down to being competitive, right? So if someone's salary is well below or even below the similar positions at comparable schools, right? Whether it's Gill Montague, Frontier, Mahar, Athol, right? Like trying to be in this Franklin County area. Obviously, we're not comparing to Boston, but in our general vicinity, right? Mohawk. If the salary in that position is far below, and I guess, sure, I mean, I'll use me again because it's more comfortable to talk about, myself, and people can talk about whether or not I'm deserving more easily because I'm right here. But for example, the contract I negotiated from one year to the next had a 0% increase. I get it. Like, the people on the steps of MIMS weren't like, man, that Jordan Burns, he'll take a 0% raise. I do understand that it doesn't work both ways, that it shows up. But so, and while negotiating that contract, I kind of, I made a point that, well, we can do that. That's fine. But the problem will come in the third year when you have to essentially account for multiple years of raises in a single year. It'll raise the eyebrows of the shrewd residents like Kathy Hawkins Harrison, and it's a reasonable question. But also, if you look at, again, just my position, the people in the role in other districts in the area, like, it's fine to be the lowest paid among those, but if you're the lowest paid by, multiple tens of thousands of dollars, the question is, right, is that sustainable as a way to plan for maintaining continuity in the position? And I think especially probably, and maybe any of the positions, but maybe especially you could argue in a director of finance type role, probably maintaining continuity is important. I think when there's a lot of changeover, that probably led to some of the issues that the district may have experienced in the past, right? I would hazard a guess that probably did. So I think, and I guess the other piece is, it's a budget number. Ultimately, I, like all the other people, will have to negotiate the salary. And, looking at, I think the other one you brought up, the tech director, that one I will say is somewhat misleading, only because, again, that contract expired after the budget. It didn't fully expire, but it was going to expire as of 6/30/23. You renegotiate to a higher number after February, and really the percent change number you're looking at is 2 years worth of increase. So I think one way to look at it is for both of those positions is multiple years, but ultimately taking that out of the equation, I mean, how do you determine the wages? I think, right, job performance is one, and then comparable salaries. So if I'm doing a comparable job, and that isn't up to me to determine, right? That's up to the superintendent and the school committee to determine. But if I'm doing a comparable job or competent job to other people who hold the role, it's probably logical that I would be compensated similarly to other people in the role. And obviously the solution, if I'm not competent, isn't to pay me less. It would be to get a different person to do it. But that would be my opinion. I'm just saying. So, and then a negotiation will happen, and I would think, not speaking for the school committee, but I would think probably what other people are getting paid to do the job in our area with similar budgets, similar revenue streams would be a determining factor. So pretty long answer, but hopefully something's reasonable. And it's great to see you, Kathy.
Tyler, sorry. There's someone in the Google Meet who'd like to speak. If they speak, is it going to be picked up, or should we have them speak and have Ray repeat it?
Putting your mic down on the speaker.
I was going to say put your mic
And
down.
there,
Okay.
just as long as the microphone,
Where's the speaker?
the important thing is that the microphone that is sending it out to them doesn't create that cycle that does the feedback. So if it's the same laptop, it'll do one or the other, so it should be fine.
Okay, should we give it a try?
Yeah, let's give it a try.
Steve, am I?
You just need one of the mics.
Steve, will you try again?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Okay, and I'm sorry for not being there for circumstances beyond my control, but I just would be so grateful to build on Jordan's response as a member of the school committee. And as someone, I'm in a profession in healthcare where we have 11 administrators for every practitioner. So that's been not a great outcome over the last quarter century. In the case of the district, though, having been here when we tried to combine roles, asking administrators to be both experts in education and finance, and ending up with a black hole of a deficit, it reminds me of another comparison, and that would be Matt Patricia trying to be the offensive coordinator for the Patriots. People are really good. In my experience, the people we have are incredibly good. And to speak directly to Jordan's work, for example, he has saved us so much money and allowed us so much opportunity and opened up possibilities that I could never have imagined the district would have had 5 years ago. We have very special teachers. We have very special staff. They need to focus on kids, and to my mind, really need to have the experts who are valuable people, and they will be picked up by other school districts if they're not, if we don't pay them a competitive wage. But the return on investment of having terrific people we can trust in the district, to me, has been just a sea change from whittling away at the administration and then ending up with, saving money on shoes by, cutting off our feet, essentially. So I think we're well staffed. I think we're proportionally staffed with administrators, and they're each bringing a great deal to the table for students and staff. And no one gave me any money to say this or anything like that. But it is a very different feeling that to know the expertise, that's in the room. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Do we want to check and see if people could hear that? Let's see, Michelle or Catherine or Amanda, could you unmute yourself and confirm that you were able to hear Steve's comments there?
Yes, I heard him.
Oh, wonderful. Do you want to ask Catherine if she wants to? Go ahead.
So Catherine DiMatteo from Leiden asked, although the budget is being held to a 3% increase, for the town assessments, how much is the total budget increase with the offsets like other revenues?
It's not on a slide, but I can say. Well, the local, but with the offsets, that's a reasonable question. So the year-over-year increase is 0.72% for all funds. That's on page 7. So going from 16,818,887 up to 16,939,303, that represents, and I just did that in my head, 0.72% increase year over year. So the local funds increase is 0.64%, and that was on a slide. I apologize, Catherine. The all funds year over year increase was only on the budget itself, but it's a 0.72% increase. And so right, and the reason there's a larger town assessment increase than the actual increase in spending relates to having other categories of revenue not increase as much, right? So, for example, our transportation reimbursement, earnings on investment, some of those other categories are going down year over year. So really the town assessments are kind of the fill in the gap placeholder. So if spending wants to increase by 0.72%, but other areas of revenue are decreasing, the only way to increase the spending is by increasing assessments close to 3%. And I think, I am certainly, in terms of the town's finances, not the expert, but what I can say is I think that although it's a 3% increase, given that I assume rates were set based on the capital and operating assessments given in March, that this 3% to the towns doesn't really feel like 3%, but there's probably two people at least who can correct me if I've gone astray. But my thought would be the slide where I showed, sorry, yeah.
Which one?
That slide, yes. The slide
22?
22, where we went from the March 15th proposed budget of operating and capital total of $8,829,172, and actually this year what we're asking for all in from the towns is $8,815,665. It probably feels to the towns, at least this year, similar to what a 0% increase would feel like, because rates by the towns were set based on that March number. So hopefully that makes it feel even more reasonable, but we do understand it's not getting cheaper to be a small town, and we need to be doing a lot of things at once, right? We need to be investing in our schools. We need to be expanding our programming, doing super interesting stuff. And we need to be looking really closely at every single expense, because basically we need to do all that and not get any more expensive. So for FY25, I think we've mostly done that. But I also know that in any of these positions, you're not judged in a single year, unlike offensive coordinator of the Patriots. So we need to continue this for 5 years, and then I think people will feel really comfortable with the trajectory. But we as we budgeted and look at things, any of the things we're doing, we're at least looking at 3 years whether our decisions are sustainable. So we feel confident that yes, 5 years from now, we're going to get a high five.
So Catherine has another comment, and it says that 3 towns will be hard-pressed to pay these increases, even if low, each year. For Leiden, our assessment percent increase is the highest this year, costing us almost $20,000 per student in PVRS schools.
I think, right, I mean, the 16,000, sorry, yeah, about, just trying to look. I think, yes, slide 25,
Yep.
right? So Leiden has an increase of $32,070, and I understand in a small town that that's still a big increase, and that's why, as I say, this year's budget, the 3% increase is largely mitigated by the fact that it's essentially the same amount of money that we had approved last year before reducing assessments. But point well taken, Catherine. We will keep a close eye on assessment growth. We do understand the difficult position towns are in, and we will be responsible partners in this work.
Hi. So I'm Melissa Peliquin. I work at Bernardston Elementary School as an administrator, and I can't get it right, IA, I'll call us an IA. I am technically an educational support professional with the state of Massachusetts, and I'm also a parent at Bernardston, and I love numbers. So I appreciate that you've put all of this together. And I'm really just going to point out a couple noticings. The first thing I noticed is when you talked about staff, that sometimes you have to cut staff. And it's not about how good of a job they do, it's really about the numbers. And that's true for us. And I think everyone that's standing here is saying, we don't doubt the work you're doing. I value and respect the work you're doing. But I still want to point out the numbers. So on slide 25, the draft FY25 town assessments, you're asking each town for an increase. And those increases, when you add them up, and then you take the 11 administration increases that you can add up from the budget, and you do some quick math, the increases that we're allotting
to most of the administration, which, by the way, are more than 2 or 3% that's given to support staff or teachers. On almost every single line item, it's 4% or more, as high as 26.41%. I can assure you that no IA in the history of Pioneer has ever had a 26.4% increase. So when you look at those numbers, the total increase that you're asking the towns just to go up, and you take the monies that the increase of the admin, that's 70% of this increase. That's eye-opening to me as a person that pays taxes. It's eye-opening to me for a person who, in order for me to get to that potential increase, I would have to go up 5 steps. I'd have to be here another 5 years to even come close to that based on our current contract. And I understand we're negotiating it. As a person that works at the school, I will say again, I respect and value the school committee. I respect and value all of the administration. But I think that if we're really going to go for 3% for all of these towns, especially Leiden, who is such a small town, has such a small demographic, I would like to see more of those monies spent on the children. And especially the special needs department or the special education department, or better training for not only the teachers who are working with an enormous amount of behaviors every single day, but the IAs who come in and are in the trenches every day doing their best to try to deal with all of the behaviors. And they can't be here, all of them, because most of the support staff are working second jobs. And I can say for a fact, almost 70% of the support staff are working second jobs. We do not have a livable wage. And we are the ones that you are spending money on to send us to training for behavior so we can treat children with love and kindness and care and be safe while we're doing it. So it is bothersome to me as a parent, as a taxpayer, and as an employee that 70% almost of what we're asking the towns to increase are in 12 people's salaries. And not one of them, and I love you all in a lot of ways, but you're not in a preschool where children are having trauma-related triggers all day long. And I'm not taking away from what you do, but I need you to understand what we're going through, and it doesn't seem equitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying, Melissa, and I do understand that administrative salaries are kind of always going to be a focus, right? Because we all know that towns need to have affordable assessments, right? And we all know how important students are and staff are, support and teaching faculty. And so it's, going to be rare for people to criticize the work that they do. So often, there's going to be a lot of focus on administration, right? Obviously, year-round employees, so that already is going to make it a bigger number, and they're the highest paid people in schools. I understand that focus. Alternatively, I think also a way, possibly more accurately though, to view administration is making possible even more resources to be available, both to the towns and in fact to the teachers. If, for example, you got a discount, director of finance and operations, or even hired a company, you might get lower performance. And that lower performance would manifest itself in less resources for teachers. So maybe you'd hire someone in my role for $80,000, and it would seem like a discount right up until the problems happened. And then it would seem $80,000 too much, but you'd have even less resources. And the assessments might go up less predictably, or up a lot in a single year. I think everyone sitting in this room can probably remember when assessments went up a ton in a single year, because of probably someone either in my role or related to that role, right? So in the short term, you potentially could save some money, but it'd be the pretty short term. I think this district, you don't have to have too long of a memory to see what can happen when you go the budget route, or as Steve Martin had mentioned, the multiple positions route, right? And you have a one FTE, and they're the superintendent and they're in charge of finance, but they only really have enough time to devote to half of each of those positions, and so they're done half as well as they would be done if you had full-time people. So I don't think we're in as adversarial relationship as it may seem. Sometimes when administrative salaries go up, there's more resources for teachers. There's more opportunity to provide professional development. And in fact, the reality in our district right now is that's what's happening, right? I am essentially not allowed to talk a lot about negotiations or anything like that, but so I can't really talk about salaries and staffing and what might be a focus of negotiation. I'm not allowed. It's not that I don't want to, but it's not appropriate. Okay, but whether it's investments in training, professional development, and we have seen salaries, especially with support staff in the last contract, right? That's not currently being negotiated. We did see individual increases of well over 10% year to year in certain staff members. So it's not 2 or 3%. That's unfortunately, that's fortunately inaccurate, because that doesn't happen. People receive a COLA and people receive a step increase, and I know in the teachers union people get stepped out and there's nowhere to go. Currently there's no one in that situation from FY23 to FY24 in the support union. No one was on the top steps. We made a new salary scale. We created differential pays. There were people who had well over 10% increases. If someone said that's still not enough, I'd say you're right, and that has to be negotiated. We're always going to keep doing it, but if the person in my role isn't keeping a close watch on the finances, you're never going to be able to get bigger increases. Like they're complementary. They're not adversarial, and I think it could even be bordering on disingenuous to pretend that there's a solution that has really modestly or low paid or underpaid administrators that also then will immediately have more money to invest in teachers and lower assessments. That isn't what will happen. And being a person who worked in a role where I was looking statewide, that isn't what happened. Districts with underpaid administrators had underperforming administrators. We don't want to have overpaid administrators, certainly, but let's look at what other people are getting paid for similar positions, and that seems a reasonable way to compensate people. And year to year, there might be some big increases, but yes, we could say, okay, these certain administrators getting an increase is why the taxes are going up. It's not really fungible in that fashion. And what about the reductions in administration? So netting, is it really the number that was quoted? It's not. It's less than that. And I think that, in fact, the towns, the staff, and the administration have to work in concert, and they all have to be competent and do their job well for any of the progress to continue. So saying, if it wasn't for these fat cat administrators, everything would be better, it's not accurate. It isn't. And I know it's going to come up every year because, again, you have teachers and support staff who are super important and work directly with students, and it's tireless. and it's not nearly rewarded as well as it should be, so people aren't going to go there. And people aren't going to say, let's raise taxes 10%, because people are paying those taxes. So there's one area that people can focus on, but I don't actually think it's getting us further along where we want to go, which is continued progress and continued competency. You need to have people, and you need to compensate them appropriately to keep them. So actually having the ability budgetarily to pay administrators appropriately is going to lead to all the things you want. So, you know, we could save money 1 year and underpay a bunch of administrators, but year 2 and 3 wouldn't be very fun.
I appreciate your comments. It wasn't adversarial. It was a noticing. And you're making my point. If you have underpaid people, whether they're administration or below, all the way down to the lowly ESP who comes in every day, it's the same truth. If you don't pay people well, it's not making them an economic agent to go find a higher paying job. In some cases, most of the people that work in this district are here not for the pay. They're here because they love the district, or they have a child here, and they also are trying to make a living. I understand what you're saying. I understand we need administration. Having been administration in my former career, I get it. It was a noticing, and I think it's important that people understand that. So thank you for your commentary back. Again, it's not adversarial. It should be camaraderie, and it should be communication, and people should be able to feel comfortable speaking their truth, which is, if you pay everyone an equitable wage, your truth about having a great administration and making things happen is true at all the way down to the IA level, to the custodian level. When people feel valued, they stay. And you don't have to train them as often, and you can keep their training. And you have people who build a culture that we want for our communities. And that's really what we're asking for. So it includes maybe equalizing some of those across everywhere where it's needed. And I understand the mindfulness and thoughtfulness that needs to go into running a community of this size. I'm just asking all of the towns and the school committee to look at it and say, where else could we save some money and put it where it's really needed, or move money, or do transfers, or think about where we're putting our money. Because I hear you saying that what you're going to do is going to make our school better and make it better for the kids that are here. I hope that happens. I hope I'm here to see it. Having a child that I have to decide whether or not they're going to middle school here and then going to Pioneer as a high school student, what happens in this room today is part of that decision-making process for a lot of people. And seeing the outcome of what you put into our school and what these kids get to learn, and making sure our teachers have the ability to do that and they have enough support staff to guide them through their terrifically challenging days at some days, is part of that. So thank you.
Melissa, thank you for your commentary. You're welcome.
Stephen Martin, school committee member, had a comment in response. He agrees, and we are actively working deliberately to bring all staff wages to a better place of respect and also at better parity with other districts for just these reasons.
Brenda Beck, accounts payable for the Pioneer Valley Regional School District, Leiden member. I also am the administrative assistant for early education. And I respect that you did math and then looking at administration and increases in administration. In Jordan's point of view, the fact that you sometimes see figures, and my figure, my position, financial clerk, you talked about as being a 26.41%. Jordan, I wish I could get a 26% increase. That would be wonderful. But with that being said, the figure that is listed here at $42,000 for '24, that's what was budgeted for me for last year. That is not my income. I make more than $42,000. I negotiated for my contract. I presented to Jordan and to Patricia other schools that were making far more than what I was making. I received an increase. The other thing that nobody seems to ever remember, I don't work 40 hours a week. I did take and I added more hours to my salary this past year. So because of that, my salary increased. So the 26% increase that you see is not really a true 26% increase. So if you would like to give me a 26% increase, that would be wonderful. But I pretty much am expecting the 2% that I receive every year. So thank you.
And thank you, Brenda. And I think I probably speak for everyone, including the school committee. We would love to give everyone a 26% increase every single year. But we also need to be responsible stewards of public money, right? So that's where the rub is. We want to do as much as we possibly can for every employee, for every student, while also being cognizant of the fact that we're stewards of public money. So I would love to give everyone 26% raises, but that isn't the reality we live in. So we need to make hard choices, and I know people won't agree with every single choice, but, and Brenda made a very important point, right? She used to work less hours per week, now she works more, so that's a significant portion of that specific increase.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, at the risk of, do you know these are called dead cats? Right?
Yes.
Yes?
The fuzzy parts.
The fuzzy part.
Melissa, this is not, I really appreciate and respect that you look at this so carefully and that you are making calculations and posing good and hard questions. I admire that. Another administrative salary, I think it's the two of them, we budgeted last year for our new directors, correct, at 105. And as Jordan explained, that budget number was set February, March. We didn't negotiate salaries until after that. When we looked at local comps for the student services, for instance, Greenfield, Gil Montague and Greenfield were 123 and 128. We hired at 110. So the 105 that's listed in last year's budget was what was budgeted. It was actually a 110. So when it goes up to 115 as a projected in this FY 25 draft budget, it looks like a 9.52% increase in that person's salary, but that's not the case. So do you get what I'm saying? Okay, so just there are stories behind the numbers sometimes that bear even more discussion in public.
I promise to make this quick. You're right. They do bear public comment and they bear people looking, and I'm glad you're saying that. And that is why having an actual column when you present a budget to people so they can understand projected versus what we actually spent going in, and having those would be a helpful tool when we are asking people to look at a budget.
Thank you, Melissa. And the issue with the actual column is there's several. One of which Well, I mean, I guess first I'll start with why we do it this way. So there are two numbers that are fixed and are actually approved as part of public record, or one number, right, is the all funds and the local from the FY24 budget. So those are actual budgetary numbers that were approved. So there's, there's no way to manipulate those, right? Those are the real budgetary numbers. Once you create an actual column, like for an individual salary, like when it's a position, like the Director of Student Services, the Director of Finance and Operations, like you can write down, okay, this person actually is contracted for this amount. But for almost every other budget line, an actual would be open to a ton of manipulation, and you could make it whatever you want. That's why, like, for example, some budgets only show local between the 2 years. And I know in other districts, the public doesn't like that, right? Because what's in the local can be hugely manipulated, right? Oh, you can put something on a grant, you can have a revolving fund. There's ways to what people refer to as hide money. So my thought process when developing a budget document is, well, let's put something that is unadulterated, pure, this happened, this was voted, this was the number. For many columns, actual, it would be a projection. And so no one would have any way to vet the number and tie out or have any backup. So the actual column would be, in my opinion, could easily diminish trust and is open to a great deal of manipulation. So I actually disagree. And having an actual column would be chaotic for almost every other line item. Like, for example, a line item like teachers, well, it's only actual to that day, right? Like who actually is working there does change often throughout the year for different line items. And when you're dealing with 20 different employees, there would be no way for anyone to actually look at that, like teacher salaries for an individual building. There would be no way to tie out to anything to vet the number and verify its accuracy. And it would also be a projection, right? So that would be my issue with presenting the budget in that fashion, is that it would be less transparent.
No.
Kathy Hawkins Harrison, Northfield resident, et cetera. My question actually goes specifically to the special education administrative position, administrative assistance position. And based on our experience here at Pioneer over the last 2 years, where we have tried valiantly to hire good people to be the administrative assistant in the main office and guidance, we have now gone through 3 people, and the last 2 people left for higher salaries. My concern would be taking this position down, it looks like, to half-time. Will you be able to, do you think you will be able to attract someone to the position and take on the workload that, even though there are, I hear, 50 less kids over the last 20 years, the workload hasn't gotten less. We often talk about the tasks of a position. So I just throw that out there as what kind of conversations were had in that decision-making.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. So in terms of attracting people to the position, yes, I think there's interest already. We don't anticipate a problem in terms of attracting people. So that's good news. In terms of turnover, schools are, we often get very focused on our school, right? But schools are in a big economic ecosystem, right? And right now there's unprecedented movement in the labor market, right? We have historically low unemployment. We have a great economy. I know no one believes it, but right, that's the story. And I think I was actually reading an article today regarding, hiring in schools and turnover in schools. And turnover in schools is much higher when the economy is doing well, when unemployment's low. So I think, and obviously we have, post-pandemic unprecedented changes in our labor market, right? I think it's like 50% of people have opportunity to work from home. Guess what you can't do if you work in a school? Work from home, right? And there's a ton of job hopping, I think as it's called, that's occurring in the marketplace because people are still able to get higher wages each time they change positions. So, we exist in that environment. When the economy is doing well, schools are always going to struggle comparatively. That's a fact, according to the research I read, not my personal opinion. I'm agnostic on the topic. But then the other question is, do we think having less special education students leads to less workload? And I think that that's one where we did think that, yes, from speaking with important stakeholders, that yes, that is one, because, for example, if you have 30 students versus 60 students, there's specific tasks that are attached to students, right? Like IEP meetings, annual reviews. I'm going to probably get some words wrong. Maybe I'll get an acronym wrong. My mom would be mortified. She was a director of special education, but I doubt she's watching. But the point is, there are specific tasks linked to the number of students, right? If there's less students, there's less of those tasks in a year. So we thought, okay, we need to look at that. So in that case, number of students is directly tied to workload because there's specific tasks associated with each student. Less students, less tasks, potentially less need for the FTE.
And Kathy, I want to make sure we're clear that it wasn't a reduction of 50 students with IEPs over the past 20 years. The entire population of students with special needs has dropped by 50% over the past 20 years. And there's a tension that is coming through in a number of the comments, right? We need to be responsible and responsive, as Jordan has said, to our towns, right? And I'm a town resident, right? It's our, yep, okay.
Dead cat.
Yeah, dead cat. Right? The towns say to us, Catherine DiMatteo is rightly pointing out, even that increase for Leiden, which we're feeling proud of our management of the projected budget, right? Ours will be, this district's budget, should it pass, will have among the lower increases, I would think, in the entire Connecticut River Valley. What I'm hearing from other superintendents are larger numbers. So we have to be responsive to the towns. We have to figure out how to be even more prudent. We have to figure out how to provide better support to our support staff, to our educators. We have to do a better job with curriculum. We need to take care of the facilities. We got to provide better, as Jordan said, better course offerings to the kids. All of this, hard choices have to be made. And I would ask that folks keep in mind, this is what it looks like to be responsible leaders. And some people will not like the decisions or suggested decisions, the recommendations for how to staff or what to do with the buildings. We cannot, as a community, have it all. We cannot have a declining student population and keep the same number of staff. We can't do it. So remember last year when we made the decision to close the French program? Right, you all heard me. I took 4 years of French, 4 years of Spanish, and I grew up hearing German in the house. I love languages. I was a bilingual teacher. It broke my heart. It was the correct decision to make, and it was really hard to do. And it didn't feel good to make a decision that maybe to the public would communicate, Pioneer can't sustain a world language program with 2. And it was the correct and hard decision to make because economically it was not justifiable. So this isn't to say, folks shouldn't come to us with, concerns or take another look at that number or how you can justify that, but there are competing demands in the organization, the way there are in every organization. The school committee has to decide, and then the taxpayers will decide. I am feeling pretty confident about our review of staffing, including administration, our work with the facilities, our projecting into the future. We were spot on projecting state revenues, and not everybody around us was. You are not at a public hearing where we are talking about having to adjust our projected budget by $500,000 because we miscalculated the cherry sheets, which are the initial sheets that tell us what the state revenue will be. So this is my little, cri de coeur for tonight, but this is hard stuff. There are inevitably going to be decisions, especially in a continuing time of transition, that make people angry, that make them feel hurt, that make them, wonder. Again, I am feeling ethically, I think this proposed budget is just. You don't have to agree with me, but I'm telling you as your district administrative lead, the process was careful. We asked a lot of people for their input, including all staff. And if the district is to survive long-term and have a beautiful, vibrant future, better than we could have imagined. 10 years from now, there are things happening that 5 years ago we wouldn't have imagined. We will continue to have to make some hard decisions. And that's it for me. Sorry.
Are there other questions or comments from anyone who hasn't spoken? I'm not seeing any additional comments online. So if there are no other comments, then I guess we can adjourn the meeting. Can I take a motion from the committee? All right. Second?
Second.
All right, and we'll do a roll call.
Melissa Gary, yes.
Stephen Martin, yes.
Thanks. Michelle? And Raina Daphne, yes. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.